And the final part of the process, of course, is the decision, when everyone involved in the hiring process gets together. And there's all sorts of ways. Maybe we'll touch later on what a good process looks like. But, I know I had my way of doing it.
Mm.
When you get this process right, what does that meeting feel like? How do you make sure that everybody is making the correct decision for both the candidate, but also the company?
Yeah. So I think, it really, that decision-making point is just a sum up and a collation of all of the information that you've gathered throughout the interview process. Re-review all of that data that you've collected. It might be hard analytic data, it might be colloquial data, it might be gut feel from other people, but make sure you've got it all in front of you. And from there, you'll have your own intuition anyway, right? But does your intuition then line up with what is sitting in front of you? If no, then maybe you've got to spend a little bit more time either trawling over the data that's sat in front of you, or doing a bit of a deeper thought in terms of your own, actually, is this what I'm actually looking for? But once you've got those two things in alignment, then it should be pretty clear on the decision that you're going to make. Is it a yes or is it a no? And, I think from the interview process, one of the things that I always ask for is, okay, from you, the panel, other people that have interviewed or other people that you've spoken to, I need a summation of what you thought of the person, and then an ultimate yes, no. Because then you've got two data points, right? You've got a hard binary kind of decision, and you've also got colloquial informal data. Quite often I will pick and choose depending on the challenge that I'm having with it, the final kind of decision-making process. Do I need just a firm yes, no, or do I need something to kind of validate what I am feeling in terms of my gut feel? So once I have all that information, it's very much just, okay, I'm in alignment, I know my decision, and I'm confident in it. And if you're confident in your decision, the steps to follow in terms of bringing that person into the organization also then unravel with more ease.
Can I dive into that a bit more? So you mentioned there that you might need to go and convince other people of your decision. And then maybe, let's just say there are 3 people in that decision meeting. And let's just say that 2 people say yes and 1 person says no. Does that no rule the candidate out? If you're one of the yeses and you feel strongly it's a yes, do you override the no? Like, how do you handle a split decision?
Yeah, I think this is ultimately why I want to collect both that data, right? It's like no, and this is why it's a no. If that no, because sometimes what will happen is someone will say no, and you'll uncover that maybe they are actually assessing this person against a different set of criteria than you are, right? And they might have picked up on something that maybe you haven't picked up on. And there's a couple of ways that you can handle that, but you should never dismiss either the no from the person outright or the no on behalf of the candidate based on a single skim over the reasoning. If it is a no because of the different criteria, then maybe you want to challenge that person on why they think that criteria is important versus maybe why you haven't. And, are they just bringing a different perspective to the same things that you saw? And maybe, they're uncovering something that you've missed or a blind spot, which is ultimately why they're there in the first place, right? And I never take someone saying no to a candidate that I'm interested in as a negative. It's more of a, what have I missed? And you've got to have people on that panel whose opinions that you fundamentally trust or who are integral to that process. But no, you should never dismiss it out of hand. I think ultimately, if you still feel in your gut that this person is absolutely right for the role, and you would back them to the hilt, then you should still go for it. And that's the most important thing, is having conviction in that person. And if anything, where there is a little bit of doubt and you still feel like it's a strong yes, then that's a really good sign for that candidate, because that you're making the decision that you should make. In terms of convincing people internally, it's just about explaining your stance. Why, you may have said up front, I'm looking for this, and this. And for me, this candidate ticked all of the boxes. And, you've had a longer engagement with this process and more time to think about it than perhaps a third party panelist coming in at a different stage. So it can be a case of saying, over time, okay, this person, I think once they get embedded in the company, will do these things and we'll set these targets for them. And let me give you some confidence that these are the things that we'll be measuring them against and that we'll be tracking. So, it's just about that open line of communication internally, really, if there is any doubt, and give the candidate and the person that you ultimately end up hiring their best opportunity to put their best foot forward And, there's no harm in having that, right? You could say to the person when they're inevitably successful, here's what you're going to do in your first couple of weeks, but it's really important we focus on demonstrating X, Y, and Z so that we can, bring in, I would never say to a candidate, this person was skeptical of you, of course, but, it's important that you demonstrate these qualities around these people, and that lets them get off with the best foot possible.
And it loops back to what we talked about earlier, which is if you're really clear at the beginning about the requirements and what you're looking for, actually that decision meeting should be, does the person meet what we were looking for? And it should never be sort of a personal opinion, really. It should be based on that data.